Hello, everybody. It is noon, so we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jordan Walker. I'm an attorney with the law firm Seaver Story Walker. I will be doing the presentation today on Texas eminent domain. It should last about 30 minutes. And if you have questions as the webinar continues, please feel free to ask them. I might not get to them until the end. But at the very least, we'll have a record of them, and the presentation itself might answer some of those questions you might have. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Jordan Walker. I'm with the law firm of Seaver Story Walker. We are a national eminent domain law firm with offices in Texas, Georgia, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, North Carolina. We are a national eminent domain firm, and because of that, we have learned quite a bit in also in all of the in many states, I should say, about eminent domain. We've seen all sorts of acquisitions, and as a consequence, we've learned quite a bit. We've collected quite a bit of experience in eminent domain in these types of property acquisitions. So today, what we are doing is kind of relaying that experience that we've accrued, relaying what we've learned about eminent domain. Dealing with so many cases. So real quick, before we get into the relaying that experience, I want to address some, I guess, administrative items. One question we get a lot is, why did you receive a letter from our firm? Why did you get that letter? Why did you receive that marketing material? The reason why you received a letter is because, according to our research on the project that affects your property, at least some right-of-way, in other words, other properties' land has been acquired on that project. So what that tells us is that if the DOT, the condemner, has come in and started acquiring on other parts of the project, that at some point here in the near future, they will come through and make an offer on your property itself. So that's why you received the letter. It's very difficult to time these projects, but this is as timely as we can get it. So that's why you received the letter, and that's why you got it now. Again, we are eminent domain attorneys. We are eminent domain attorneys only, as the only area of practice that we have. Not only that, we are only landowners. We only represent landowners. We've never represented condemners, and we've only helped people on the private property owners in condemnation matters. Our mission as a firm is to serve those landowners that we feel are underrepresented. There are not a lot of folks that do what we do. And our mission as a firm is to serve those populations that are not getting adequate eminent domain representation. We do not work with a condemner. We've, again, never worked for a condemner. Some people get confused when they get our letters and they think that maybe we do. We do not. The information that we get is based on public information that's available, and also just research that we do via publicly available information as well. Again, we're going to be talking about eminent domain and key points. So with that being said, we'll just jump into the educational portion of this. What is eminent domain? A lot of people don't know what that is. Some people do. Put short, eminent domain is the forced acquisition of your property for public use, for a public purpose. The most traditional condemnation method is for road projects. But obviously, and especially in Texas, pipelines, power lines, utility work, they are right there with road projects as far as frequency of condemnations. A lot of pipelines being built, a lot of power lines being built, a lot of utilities being built, and of course, a lot of roads being built. With population growth comes more roads, and consequently comes more eminent domain. So with eminent domain, it is effectively that they can take it, but they still need to pay what's referred to as just compensation. And it's not just compensation. The key word in that phrase is just. And the DOT's definition of just and what they feel you're entitled to might be starkly different than what you feel you're entitled to. And it's important to keep that in mind when examining this. So they can take it, but they have to pay just compensation. They have to pay the right amount of money for what they're doing to your property. Condemners, generally have the inherent eminent domain authority meaning if they are filing, they have the ability to do it. The Texas Department of Transportation, of course, has inherent eminent domain authority. Other municipalities, public entities have this ability to file these lawsuits. You as an individual landowner do not have the ability to file an eminent domain lawsuit, but certain entities do. And with the Texas Department of Transportation or cities, villages, municipalities, they have that inherent ability. And all that means is that it's very difficult to challenge these acquisitions, meaning stopping them. I tell folks that even if you stop it, usually that means it's because they didn't follow the law in their pre-suit negotiations. And all that means effectively is that they can go back and fix those errors that they committed and refile if they'd like to. So stopping acquisitions, by and large, is pretty difficult. And sometimes it's only a fleeting accomplishment. But if that's something you're interested in doing, you certainly can. You have the ability to do that. It is somewhat of an uneven playing field when it comes to challenging acquisitions. The landowner is usually behind the eight ball in many regards. The playing field is not very even. And again, generally, if they follow the law and they aren't doing anything that is unreasonable, arbitrary and capricious is the term that they use, the law states, then they're very likely going to be able to take the property. So I tell people it's probably more worth your time to focus on the compensation portion and not necessarily stopping the acquisition itself. Because the compensation phase of the process, that is what you're entitled to, just compensation, it's a more even battle. The parties are on more equal footing, and you can you can present your evidence a little more. You're able to present evidence. You have more, I guess, bargaining power at the compensation phase versus stopping the taking phase. So, and we'll get into that here in a bit, but I do want to talk about the process in Texas, because the process in Texas is, as I assess it, pretty aggressive, pretty compact, and this is all it's gonna happen, and it could potentially happen very fast. And it's important to keep that in mind when you get these offers, that the clock is ticking. There are statutory deadlines, there are statutory requirements, and the Texas statute allows condemners to move at a swift pace. From offer to litigation, they can move very swiftly if they choose to. And so it's important to keep that in mind when you get that offer, that the clock's ticking, and if you sit on it too long, you could be in eminent domain, and maybe you don't want to be in that scenario, that situation. This is the process that from beginning to end for eminent domain acquisitions in Texas. So prior to them even filing a lawsuit, they need to engage in an offer process. The days that I've assigned on this are the most ambitious of the timelines, meaning it is allowed legally for an acquisition to move at this pace. Now, is that a guarantee that it's going to move at this pace? No. Sometimes there's going to be some delays here and there, but you can't count on that. And you need to anticipate the worst case scenario, which is them moving rapidly through the phases, including into eminent domain. So this is the pre-eminent domain process phase. The first day, they give you an offer. It'll be in writing. They will issue it. It's called an initial offer. That'll be day one. It might have an appraisal. It might not. It probably will. But you will have that initial offer. You'll get it. That's day one. Okay. And then on day 24, which is the rule is at least 7 days prior to the final offer being issued, and we'll get into the final offer, at least, or at the latest, the landowner needs to receive what's called the landowner bill of rights. The landowner bill of rights is a set of codes in the Texas code that protect landowners from eminent domain overreach, from aggressive condemners acting outside of the boundaries of the law. But they also set forth some rights that you have as a landowner in these scenarios, in these eminent domain acquisitions. So on day 24, they have to provide this to you. They have to provide you with the landowner bill of rights. And at the earliest they could do it would be on day 24. On day 31, 30 days after the initial offer, at least 30 days after the initial offer, you get a written final offer. So there'll be two different offers that will be issued prior to the condemnation, or must be issued rather. In that day 31 offer, it must have the appraisal report, and the offer must be equal or greater than that report. So if the appraisal report that the condemner did says your property is worth $40,000, they can't offer you 30. They have to offer you at least 40 in this final offer. In addition to that, they need to supply the conveying document, whatever you're actually giving to the condemner, whether it's an easement or a full fee simple right away. That would come in the form of a deed as well. They need to present that deed or that easement with this offer. They need to include a plat map, and of course, it needs to be in writing. Just keep in mind, this is what you will get. This is what you need to get. Just as an aside, a practice note for our firm, we get involved as soon as the initial offer is issued, and sometimes sooner. In select cases, sometimes we'll represent landowners without them having received their offer yet. Those are select cases. Happy to talk to you about that if that's something you're interested in. But generally, we don't get involved until the initial offer is issued, and then we absolutely will get involved. Because at that point, you have a case, you have an acquisition, you know what's happening, and I can evaluate it and see if it's a good deal or a bad deal. So all of those phases were pre-litigation. So these were all pre-suit. No lawsuit's been filed. These are statutory required steps that the condemner needs to take before they file their lawsuit. Okay, so at day 31, there's no deal. You have not reached a deal. Nothing can be hashed out. This is a case that requires eminent domain, for example. Okay, well then on day 46, at least 15 days after the final offer is issued, the petition can be filed by the condemner. So we're talking 46 days or 45 days after you receive the initial offer, you could potentially be in litigation. Again, this is an aggressive schedule, more aggressive than I see in other states. This is an aggressive schedule, and it requires your attention when the offers are being issued. This is not a situation where you can maybe get to it later due to the time constraints involved. So, okay, so let's say no deal has been reached. The lawsuit has been filed. That's the petition. The petition is filed in the county where the property is located. And when the petition is filed, also contemporaneous with that, a board of commissioners would be appointed by the judge or can be appointed by the judge the same day the petition is filed. And the board of commissioners, their purpose is an administrative role. These are a landowner, or rather citizens that live in the county where the property is located. They're appointed by the judge, and their duty is to determine what I'm going to term preliminary compensation. And I'll get into that here in the next bullet point. And that hearing on compensation serves as a preliminary compensation determination for purposes of DOT getting access to the property. So back to the schedule. Day 46, the Board of Commissioners has been appointed. The judge appoints the commissioners. And then day 90 to 120, so potentially less than 45 days after the Board of Commission is a Board of Commissioners appointed, I should say at least 20 days after they're appointed. But I put this is actually not quite. They could even get even earlier than that. They could even have the Board of Commissioners on day 66. So, but but realistically, you're probably looking at day 90 to 120 for the hearing on compensation. And the Board of Commissioner, basically, they hold a hearing on preliminary compensation. You are allowed to present evidence. The DOT or the condemner is allowed to present evidence. And ultimately, the commissioner, the same day, will determine the board will determine just compensation from a preliminary perspective. So let's say the DOT offered you $30,000 in their written final offer. They file the lawsuit, and a Board of Commissioners is appointed. The DOT comes to the hearing and says it's worth 30. Well, in that interim, you, the landowner, have been able to get an appraisal. You got an attorney, you got an appraisal. You show up at the Board of Commissioners hearing, and you say it's actually worth $100,000. On that day, the Board of Commissioners will determine a verdict effectively that sets preliminary compensation. So let's say the Board of Commissioners, here's 30, here's 100, splits the baby and says, okay, it's worth 70. What happens then? The 70 acts as the final administrative step before the DOT or the condemner can actually take the land and begin construction on the property. Once the Board of Commissioners determines that value, the DOT can take the property, which they will, and then they will also deposit whatever that amount of money is that's been determined with the court. Both sides, and I should say, that Board of Commission determination, the only purpose that it serves is a preliminary step to get the DOT onto the land. Okay, let's say it is not the end of your case. You are entitled to a jury trial eventually if you'd like. But the main purpose of that is to establish compensation to allow the DOT to get onto the property while the case continues and final just compensation is determined. This is termed quick take in the eminent domain world. And effectively what it means is, and this is common in most states where there's an apparatus built into the law that allows condemners to get the land before final compensation is determined. So back to the schedule, the Board of Commissioner determination has been reached. Either party may object to that determination. If neither party objects to it, the case is over, and that value ends up being your final compensation. If either party objects to that amount of money, the case continues towards a jury trial on final compensation. If that happens, if either party objects and the case continues, that preliminary determination is not relevant for the final determination. It is not in and of itself evidence. Everything that happens at that trial basically stays in that hearing, and then you have your own jury trial if you object, where you're basically having a brand new trial on compensation, this time in front of a jury rather than in front of a commissioner's board. The point of all this is that there is a compressed and aggressive condemnation schedule. Texas has a very, again, it's a pretty aggressive schedule, which demands the landowner's attention. It demands your attention to what's going on, because if you don't afford it, then you could end up in a spot you don't want to be. Okay, and then this is a question that I get a lot. Will my case require eminent domain? And the common answer for attorneys on pretty much every question they get asked is it depends. But what I would say, what our firm generally advises, is that most cases don't require eminent domain. Most cases can be resolved pre-suit during the pre-suit negotiations. We personally, our firm handles cases, again, during pre-suit and at suit. Our representation extends from until the case is resolved from whenever you hire us. So we don't just stop at the pre-suit. We follow it to the end, wherever that end may be. But whether your case actually reaches eminent domain, it generally depends on the difference of opinion. If you have a $3,000 difference in between the parties on what you think it's worth and what they think it's worth, that's probably not going to go to eminent domain. If you have a $3 million difference, that probably will. And that is a case that you probably want to go to eminent domain, because what I tell folks is that if you are at eminent domain, it should be because you want to be, because the DOT has not come to the table with the amount of money that properly compensates you and effectively leaves you with no choice but to pursue that compensation at eminent domain. Again, most of our cases resolve pre-suit. Some do not, but our representation stays the same regardless. And beyond that, it also depends on the DOT's willingness to settle, of course, and how effective your argument is. A lot of people come to me and they say, well, I want money for this, and I want money for that. And not everything is compensable in eminent domain. You can't just say it and get it. There are some categories of compensation you're not entitled to. So if you go to the DOT with a counteroffer, for example, filled with non-compensable items, issues that you don't get money on at court, then it's going to be very difficult to get a settlement, because the DOT is not going to want to negotiate with people that are asking for money that you don't otherwise get. So that's an important consideration also on whether or not your case reaches eminent domain. Bottom line, like I said, if you are at eminent domain, it's because you want to be there, because that's the only forum where you're going to get the right amount of compensation. In other words, DOT hasn't left you any choice. Okay, and then moving on, this is some general advice for what to do when you receive your offer from the right-of-way agent, the initial offer, I should say. What you should do, absolutely insist that the right-of-way communicates via email only, sends their offer packet via email in addition to regular mail. A lot of times right-of-way agents like to show up in person and start negotiating. I do not recommend that. Usually in-person negotiations are where things go sideways for landowners, and it ultimately doesn't benefit you to have these kind of off-the-record discussions. I like to maintain all my communications with the right-of-way agents via email or text, if you do it that way. In other words, printed on a writing exists. You can look back on the record and see what you said this and they said that, and, and so on and so forth. Establish a record with your communications with the right-of-way agent if you choose to negotiate. Once you get the offer, what I tell people is tell the right-of-way agent via email or text, thank you, I will review this and get back to you in a week. I say this because you're not being unreasonable, you're not asking for too much time, you're also not compressing your schedule too much, but you're also giving yourself some time to respond comprehensively to any offers. It is never wise to just get an offer and start negotiating. That's how people get in trouble. That's how people get deals that they should not be getting, bad deals. So very easy. Thank you for the offer. I will review this and get back to you in a week. They're not going to get upset over a week. They understand, that's a completely reasonable answer, a fair response. So I think that's a fair response for you as well. In that week, that's when you contact an attorney for a review. Our firm, me personally, we issue these offers for free. If you have an offer, I will review it for free and get back to you with my thoughts on it within a day. It doesn't take me a week to get through an offer. If you send it to me on a Monday, I'll probably get to you either that Monday or on Tuesday. We're pretty quick. We do quick turnarounds. I've seen enough offers and appraisals. We know what we're looking for. So just keep that in mind if that's something you're interested in. But again, avoid in-person discussions and negotiations with right-of-way agents. What not to do. Do not engage in negotiations or discuss value or the property in general before contacting an attorney. This is kind of like, the right to remain silent, so to speak. The attorney is always advocating that clients generally don't talk to police officers, don't talk to, when you're involved in an incident like that. The same general rule on a less, severe topic applies. Don't start blathering to the right-of-way agent. Don't start talking about value. Don't start negotiating. Jumping into negotiations without preparation is a plan to fail. The reason why I say this is that ultimately you might not even know what you're entitled to. And that's not to say that you don't have an understanding of property values in the area. You might, but there's a lot that goes into these cases that you might not be able to identify. There's effects that exist. There's ordinance compliance that need to be considered. And also considering what's compensable and what's not. So just keep that in mind, that before you engaging in these negotiations, discussing value, generally not a wise idea without first talking to somebody. You're obviously free to negotiate, but I generally advise to at least talk to somebody, talk to an attorney who knows what they're doing before you get back to them. You can always disregard what the person tells you, but I would generally advise at least to get a second opinion before you engage in these types of negotiations. And also keep in mind that generally these right-of-way agents keep contemporaneous notes of all of the meetings they have with landowners, meaning if you blurt out a value in your property, let's say they offer you $10,000, you think it's worth 30, you say, well, I want 30. And then you contact me and I look at it and I was like, well, actually you should be getting 70 or 80. And the problem is that you already told them you'll take 40. And you already told them you think the property's worth 40. And they're going to write that down, and that's going to stick with your file. And everybody, the attorneys at the DOT, the right-of-way agents, everyone will know that you initially would have accepted that and also think your property's worth that. So it's never good to tip your hand, of course, and that's a quick and easy way to tip your hand and maybe cause some damage you don't want to do, is starting these negotiations with right-of-way agents without getting a consultation. Don't get an appraiser unless instructed to by an attorney. This is important only because sometimes it's not worth it. Sometimes you don't need to get an appraisal. A lot of times it'll seem like you have to or you're required. And a lot of times you will have to get an appraisal, but not always. So it's important to, before you go out and spend that money on that appraisal, to talk to somebody to see if it's even worth it. And beyond that, eminent domain appraisals are expensive, and they need to be done by qualified individuals that make it worth the money you're spending. And if you go out and spend money, you might end up getting an appraisal from a guy who's never testified before, who doesn't know how to testify in an eminent domain trial, doesn't know how to testify in a deposition, doesn't know the right words to say and how to present the case. But then you already spent the money on it, so it's gone. So if you are going to spend that money, make sure you're spending it on the right people that can get you the best return on that investment. Do not meet in person with right-of-way agents. Do not make a rush decision. Now, these seem counterintuitive pieces of advice, but again, admittedly we are on a tight schedule that you would think would lead to a rush decision, but I wouldn't necessarily call a decision that's been made with due diligence rushed if it's made quickly. You can make a quick decision, or a relatively quick decision that has due diligence and consideration of everything that's affected. But I would classify a rush decision as something where there's no further consultation. It is just, I think it's this, and they issue an offer, and that's that. So I would, again, rush decisions are usually the wrong ones, but also, again, talking about the schedule, do not ignore it altogether. I have landowners who don't want to, they get these notices of eminent domain from the condemners, and they put it aside. They throw it aside. They don't talk about it again. What happens? They don't do anything, and all of a sudden they're in eminent domain and they don't know what they're supposed to do, or if they should be there to begin with. So don't ignore it altogether. It happens more often than I'd like. Okay, and then moving into the compensation portion of eminent domain and kind of what arguments you can make and what is compensable, what's not. So there are two types of acquisitions in eminent domain. There are partial acquisitions, there are total acquisitions, or full acquisitions. Partial acquisitions, as you might imagine, only acquire a part of the property you own. If you own a 2-acre parcel, they might acquire the front third. That would be a partial acquisition. A partial acquisition is where you leave a remnant, you leave a remainder, something that's part of the property is left behind. And for partial acquisitions, the first thing to focus on, or to direct your attention, is about the value of the property. What's the property worth? What are they offering in their appraisal? Or what does the DOT think the property's worth? And then actually kind of doing your own research. That's something that we do, of course, as well, on your behalf, to determine the value of the property. I thought, and that's generally determined on a price per acre, of course, price per square foot basis as well, looking at similar comps of the property, just general property valuation. Now, however, it gets a little tricky, because in eminent domain, you can make an argument for the highest and best use of the property. And highest and best use is defined as the highest and best use of a property that brings back the most value to the property. An example would be a residential piece, or a piece of property that's being used as a residence, but is ultimately surrounded by commercial development. The highest and best use of that property, arguably, is commercial, even though it's being used in an interim use as a residential property, and it has a house on it. The argument going that if this property were to sell in the open market, it would sell as a commercial property. And if you can effectively make that argument, you can increase your valuation quite a bit, just arguing a higher and better use than what the property is being used for. That's big. Experts, of course, are pivotal. This is the appraisal I was talking about, making sure you have the right people looking for the comps that afford you just compensation. And we know those people. We have those appraisers lined up, ready to go. Those are part of our services. Remainder damage. Remainder damage is the second component of any partial acquisition, and this refers, of course, to the remnant, what's left behind. For residential partial takings, the biggest component of remainder damage we see are setback loss. So the house is closer to the road, it loses what's referred to as setback. and consequently, the house loses value. Generally speaking, houses that are closer to roads are worth less than houses that are further back. So if you reduce that setback, the property could lose quite a bit of value. That would be an example of remainder damage. Ordinance noncompliance is also a big thing. If a road project puts you out of compliance with local zoning, that can local ordinances rather, that could be an issue as well. Examples of remainder damage for commercial properties: ordinance noncompliance comes up a lot. Access limitation as a remainder damage component. Visibility, same thing, as a remainder damage component. Reduced parking, big one. That's a big one. It happens quite a bit, of course, because parking is usually located along the road that's being widened. Reduced parking can have an impact. Reduced size. Let's say your property is so much of it is taken such that it's too small to develop. That's an issue. Loss of signage, a change in your highest and best use. If the acquisition causes your property to be maybe commercial, and then in the after it's assemblage, that lowers the value. Causes an altered configuration. All of these things, they all fall underneath the same umbrella that is remainder damage. What is the impact on the remnant? And that's a big one, of course, because usually sometimes they're offered, but not usually to the extent they need to be. And then finally, business losses. Business losses in select situations where businesses are operating on the property. Those business losses are compensable in certain select situations. It applies to businesses that are functioning on the property. And it allows to potentially recover any lost profits sustained because of the acquisition itself. Again, in select situations, and of course, only for properties that have businesses on them. Okay, and then moving to the total acquisition keys. The first key stays the same: value of the acquisition. What's the property worth? That is the same in partial and total. Business, again, same thing. Business losses, rather. The key difference between partial and totals is relocation benefits. Relocation benefits are only, again, for total takings where there's a residence or an active commercial operation on the property, or I should say, on the property, and it's being displaced, meaning it's being acquired such that it won't exist anymore. So most commonly with houses, if you live in a house and own a residence and you are being displaced, you're entitled to moving expenses plus a differential payment. The differential payment represents the difference of value between your home and the available homes on the market. Meaning you get for relocation, you get what it costs to move all your belongings, and you also get a differential payment. So if your home's worth $300,000, but all of the homes on the market that are similar to that are listed for $500,000, as an example, you would be entitled to a $200,000 differential payment to get you into that theoretical $500,000 home. It's important to keep in mind with a lot of these categories is that is not a taxable gain. Differential payments are generally, they're generally not taxable. We are not tax attorneys, but generally speaking, the differential payment does not have the same taxing. Does not have the taxable percentage that other components do. So keep that in mind. There are some tax issues that play in these cases. And then finally, for commercial acquisitions, they also are entitled to relocation benefits, but they do not get the differential payment that residential properties get. So basically, moving expenses and reestablishment expenses for commercial properties. Okay, folks, we are almost at the end. So I just have a couple more slides, and we'll open up questions. First question I get a lot, of course, is how can I afford an attorney? Our firm operates on a contingency fee basis, meaning there's no upfront costs, there's no retainer fee. If you want to hire our firm, it's as simple as signing a contract and us taking over the case and contacting the condemner on your behalf. You don't have to pay me money to be my client, or you don't have to pay money for me to be your attorney. That comes out at the end after the case is resolved, because as I stated, we operate on a contingency fee, meaning we collect a portion of what we get for the landowner over and above the initial offer. So in this example that I've provided here, let's say your initial offer was $10,000 and you hire our firm, and then by hook or by crook, we get you to $100,000. In that situation, we would take a third of the, in any situation, we would take a third of the difference we add to the case. So in that situation, it would be a $90,000 add that we would collect a third of. You would get the rest. One question I also get a lot is, Jordan, what if you don't get one more dollar than what is offered? And do I still collect a fee? And the answer is I do not. We only collect a fee if we get more money, which is why we are judicious with what cases we collect. We don't just take on any old case off the street. If we take on your case, it's because we see some money to be made there, and we think we can get you to that spot. And then finally, we pride ourselves on our experience, our knowledge of the law, but I also understand that we're more, I think, accurately judged by clients by how well we do for them and what our results are. We are a results-based firm. These are just some examples, I should say, of road project cases where the first number is what was offered and the second numbers were initially offered and second numbers where we ended up. These are not guarantees of success or results. This is not me guaranteeing to you that you're going to get these amounts on your case. Every case is different. Every case has different claims and different. Every property is legally different from one another. So these are not guarantees that you're going to get that, but they are demonstrative, I think, of how wrong these initial offers can be from these DOTs, from these condemners. They'll come in and they'll make these offers that are wholly insufficient, and they're going to require you to raise your voice and fight for the true value of your property, the true just compensation. And these are, again, just examples of some situations in the past. These are not guarantees. And this is my final slide, and I will, once I'm done, I will open this up. Moving forward, what I tell people is if you have the initial offer, the time to hire an attorney is now. If you have a final written offer, the time is definitely now. If you don't have an offer, I think the time to evaluate attorneys, see what you're going to do, develop a plan is now. There's not a lot that you can do without that offer. But once you do get it, again, as I say before, we will absolutely 100% review that case, that offer for free, and I will give you my thoughts. So if it's as simple as if you want to text it to me, if you want to email it to me, if you want to mail it to us, that's fine too. Fax it. Either way, we'll look at it. We'll get back to you within a day or two and give you our thoughts. This is my cell phone number, this 470 number, which is why it's 470. So you can text this number if you have an offer and you want to send it to me. You can text it to that number. I understand there are usually appraisals involved with these offers, so it might be hard to text an appraisal. Email might be better for that. But in any event, again, do not be rushed into a decision. They're going to want you to do that. And you might need to make a quicker decision, but quick decisions can still be done comprehensively and with due diligence. If you have landowners and if you have neighbors in the area, this is just something we say. It's not required, and it's just something we toss out there in case this applies. Is if you have a bunch of neighbors in the area that are affected by the same project, maybe neighbors are all talking to one another about it. If you come to me and say, Jordan, I have 5 landowners on this project, and these are all cases that we would take, there could be potential for me to reduce my fee because it allows for more effective representation of all the clients in the same area. So something to consider, not required at all, but something we throw out there as well. So with that being said, that is the end of my presentation. I don't see any questions, so I will give some time if anyone has any to go ahead and ask them. Okay, I do not see any questions from anybody. Okay. Well, if there are no questions, that's fine. Just if you think of something later, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to answer. I'm happy to, if you have a quick question, you can text it, you can email it to me, happy to respond. Other than that, thank you so much for stopping by today. We appreciate it. If you have any questions, let me know. And if you have an offer, send it in. Otherwise, Thanks. Appreciate it. Oh, there's a question. I'm sorry. If they offer a partial taking, do we have to agree to that? You don't have to agree to any offers that are initially provided to you. You are not required to accept any offers that are issued. As a matter of fact, we generally, even if you ultimately end up accepting it, we generally advise at least getting a consultation before you decide to accept it. But no, you're not under any requirement to accept an offer, and you are well within your right to reject it and move the case forward. Okay, are there any other questions that you're welcome? Okay, don't see any other questions. So thank you for that question again. I appreciate it. Okay, since there aren't other questions, that is it from me. Again, if you think of it later, just don't hesitate to email or text me and we can talk about it later. Other than that, thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate it and good luck.